Recording. Okay. So thank you everyone for coming today. It's a great turnout. So I'm happy to see everyone. I wanted to start today with a brief disclaimer. I am autistic. I was diagnosed a little over a year ago. In the last year, I've done a lot of research on autism and talked to a lot of autistic people. I'll be sharing some of my experiences and some generalizations about autism. So it's important to remember these are generalizations and won't apply to every autistic person. So there's a saying, if you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. We're all very different. So I spent the majority of my life hating being me. Everything was so hard for me, but for other people, it wasn't. And no matter how hard I tried to be normal, I just wasn't pulling it off. Finding out I was autistic changed my life dramatically. It helped me understand a lot of my childhood and daily struggles I have today. I learned ways to accommodate myself to make life easier. I've learned to embrace parts of myself and be more forgiving of other parts of myself. So it's just my brief disclaimer before we get started on my PowerPoint. So let me go ahead and see if I can get all this working right. Okay. Let me find my chat. There we go. All right, so today we'll be talking about understanding autism, addressing myths, and increasing acceptance. Hi, Sarah, I'm glad you made it. And I realized today I should have called it autism, a personal experience or something like that, but that is not what I called it. All right, so this is a quote by an autistic woman who was diagnosed late in life, and I was diagnosed very late in life. It's been just a little over a year. I'm 53. So, yeah, I think this is a great summary of being diagnosed late in life. So, growing up autistic but not knowing is just hiding in your room while people are over, getting tired and needing to rest or recharge after the smallest chore, getting called a gifted kid, knowing that you're weird because people are making fun of you, but not knowing how to stop being weird. I really relate to that one. Having adults tell you how mature you are, getting in trouble for not doing your work, convincing yourself that you're lazy and stupid because you can't make yourself do work, and then getting really invested in weird media. All right, and this is the definition of autism, or a definition of autism. So autism spectrum disorder is a complex developmental condition involving persistent challenges with social communication, restricted interest, and repetitive behavior. While autism is considered a lifelong disorder, the degree of impairment in functioning because of these challenges varies between individuals with autism. So again, getting to it is a spectrum. There's a lot of variation in autistic people and how they present. So some statistics on autism. 1 in 40 children are identified with autism spectrum disorder. It's 4 times more likely to be diagnosed in boys than in girls. 80% of autistic girls are not diagnosed by the age of 18. So it is very, very underdiagnosed in girls and in women. And we'll talk some about how it presents in girls and why it is so underdiagnosed. Studies have shown that it may actually be more common in girls. I've seen statistics of up to 5 times more common in girls than in boys. but the majority of those are undiagnosed. 40% of diagnosed children are nonverbal. Because there's so many girls that aren't diagnosed, that statistic is probably a lot lower as far as nonverbal autistic children. Less than 40% of autistic students graduate college, and they are 28 more times likely to attempt suicide. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics? The biggest characteristic of autism is an overactive nervous system. There's, something going on with the nervous system. It is extremely overactive. So autistic people are taking in a lot of input at all times. And this leads to a lot of these characteristics that we see. Different parts of the brain are overstimulated because of this overactive nervous system. So autistic people tend to get stuck or have repetitive thoughts. Fixations are extremely common. We like to call them special interest. So almost all autistic people have some special interest, and given a chance, they will info dump about their special interest, which basically means they will gladly tell you everything they know about this special interest. It's extremely hard for autistic people to switch focus. If you have autistic children, you've probably noticed this, that transitions are extremely difficult. It's hard to stop doing one thing and start doing another thing. Sensory processing, big issue. So this could be sounds are too loud, things, very sensitive to smells, very sensitive to light, everything's too bright, things touching you. It's because the nervous system is already overactive, all these additional inputs just put additional stress on the nervous system. And so it's very hard to integrate these sensations. And that makes autistic people easily overwhelmed. And this overwhelm can show up in different ways. It may lead to meltdowns, particularly in younger children. It may lead to someone becoming nonverbal or withdrawn. It could lead to, anger. So there's a lot of ways this overwhelm can present itself, but it's very common. What are these bings? Sorry. Is there someone in the waiting room? It's hard for me to tell. Okay. So autism is a spectrum, as I said. So there are different degrees of autism, and there's different degrees of the different characteristics. So these are the main characteristics of autism. We'll start with having meltdowns, problems with eye contact, social issues, sensory issues, need for routine, executive function. We'll talk more about this in a little bit. Communication problems, restricted interest, anxiety, and stimming. These are kind of the big characteristics. And this is just showing that people can vary a lot on where they fall in these. So someone might have, very restricted interest, but not have a lot of problem with executive function. Someone else might be, a 10 on not being able to keep eye contact, but maybe they don't stim a lot. And so it can really vary. That makes it hard a lot of times to diagnose autism because there isn't just one presentation of autism. There's infinite presentations of autism, basically. All right, so let's address some of the myths about autism. And some of these are based on characteristics, but they've kind of been overemphasized, maybe. So the first myth is that autism is new. And I hear this one from my husband a lot, that, it's just like a new thing that's been made up to explain people's problems or something like that. So, certainly it's diagnosed more, but that's because we know how to diagnose it. But autism is not new. autistic people have always been around. Thousands of years ago, they were the person that, they might have said, oh, Bobby's kind of, strange, but he's great at tending the sheep. Or, Liz never got married, but she sure can make some amazing cheese. So, the people that had very specialized interest, and those were respected, they were appreciated, they were important for civilization. Autistic people are obsessed with trains. So it is true, autistic people do have special interest, and they can be very, very, very into their special interest. And sometimes trains are a special interest, but not all autistic people are obsessed with trains. Rocking and flapping hands. So these are called stims. Because of this overactive nervous system, autistic people need a way to get energy out, release it from the nervous system to try to stabilize themselves. And they do this by stimming. Stimming can be rocking and flapping hands. Those would be large stims. But a lot of autistic people have much smaller stims, particularly girls. Um, Girls tend to mask a lot more, meaning they hide their autistic characteristics. So they tend to have smaller stims. So for example, some of my stims are skin picking, particularly around my cuticles. If you could see my hands right now, they are a mess because I'm constantly picking my skin on my fingers. Another stim I have is if I'm wearing something with a zipper, I will zip the zipper up and down, just like repeatedly, just up and down, up and down. Same with like a button. I'll button and unbutton a button over and over and over and over. Yeah, that can be one too, Sarah, the clearing the throat. So they can be smaller stems. Twirling hair is an example that a lot of girls will have. So yeah, stems can be smaller, but stems are very important, as I said, hold on, there's a lot of people in the waiting room that I need to admit. There we go. But stems are very important for releasing that excess energy that comes about from having the overactive nervous system. All right, another myth is that people with autism can't make eye contact. So it's not that people with autism can't make eye contact, it just isn't always comfortable to make eye contact. But certainly we can train ourselves to make eye contact. And then sometimes you'll find that autistic people make too much eye contact, and it actually is uncomfortable for other people because we don't know the right amount of eye contact to make. Yeah, it's easier not to make eye contact, definitely. But, oftentimes, like I said, we'll train ourselves to make eye contact, but we don't know the right amount of eye contact. And then it becomes this thing in your head like, am I making too much eye contact? Should I look away now? Have I been looking too long? If I look away, will they think I'm not interested? And your mind just starts like freaking out over eye contact. So, yeah. Yeah, it is. And then you're distracted and you can't pay attention because all you're thinking about is, am I making the right amount of eye contact? Nice thing about online, you don't have to worry so much about the eye contact thing. Another characteristic, autistic people only eat one food. This can be true. Some autistic people only eat one food. Some autistic people have a varied diet. It really depends on the person. There is something called ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. It can be common in autistic people. But for a lot of autistic people, it's certain foods they can't eat, oftentimes to do with texture. Yeah, that's nice, Sarah, because, you know, someone not making eye contact doesn't mean they're not paying attention. So textures of foods and smells of foods in particular can be a big problem for autistic people. I personally can't eat nuts or beans because of the weird, dry, crumbly texture that they have. It just doesn't work for me. Yeah, temperature, definitely. I can't eat foods that are supposed to be hot. I can't eat them cold. Yeah, that might be a texture thing. Like I can't do any nuts or beans because of that texture. It's just a weird texture to me that doesn't agree with me. And then foods that have a strong smell are very problemsome. There are foods I've never even tried because of the smell. For example, tuna fish. I can't. The smell is so bad to me. I've never tried it. I can't do it. It's understandable, Sarah. And it can change. That's the most frustrating thing is, for example, I will get stuck on a food. So I might eat that same food every day for 2 years. And then one day the thought of that food makes me sick. And then I can never eat that food again the rest of my life. So that's frustrating too. It might be their favorite thing one day, and the next day, the thought of it is revolting. And yeah, exactly, Barbara. That certainly can happen. And, that could be a special interest, the food. But don't be surprised if one day just the thought of that food is revolting, because it definitely happens. Okay, another myth, autistic people are blunt or can't lie. So autistic people may have a tendency to be more blunt than other people. We don't really understand the point of small talk or beating around the bush or things like that. But certainly we can learn to not be so blunt. And autistic people certainly can lie. You know, we might prefer not to lie, but it's not a problem to lie. Yeah, omitting, not a problem. And, particularly as you mask more and more, lying becomes easier and easier. All right, another myth, autistic people don't like physical affection. This can be true. Some autistic people don't like to be touched at all. Um, a lot of autistic people don't like light touch. Light touch, it like overactivates that nervous system that's already overactivated. So light touch can feel very painful, actually. Autistic people generally prefer a deep touch. So a firm hug, something like that, as opposed to like rubbing their arm. A lot of autistic people also only like to be touched by people that they trust. So strangers touching them is a no-go. I can't do massages. I don't want people I don't know touching me. But people I know and trust, a good hug, squeeze on the shoulder, some sort of deep touch is nice. And another myth is that autistic people lack empathy. And this is a big one. A lot of people really think that autistic people lack empathy, but a lot of autistic people have hyper empathy. Meaning, they empathize with everything. And this can manifest as even empathizing with inanimate objects, not being able to throw something away because it would make that thing sad. Having to have all the stuffed animals on the bed because you don't want any of them to feel left out, things like that. So, hyper empathy can be a problem. No, not a problem, but a characteristic of autistic people. All right, so let's talk about the difference between autism in boys and girls. So autism diagnosis is mostly based on characteristics in boys. And this is why girls are so underdiagnosed. Um, there can be a big difference in characteristics in boys and in girls. So autism in boys tends to start earlier. You might notice, at 2 or 3 years old. Girls, you may not notice until, they go to school, 6 years old. Boys have physical sensitivities. They tend to have larger stems, so they might do the hand flapping and the rocking. They can be aggressive. They tend to be more solitary. They can lack social skills, avoid physical contact, have a strong sense of justice. So, strong sense of things being fair, and really, really get hung up on this isn't fair. Bad handwriting and special interest. A lot of girls do not get diagnosed with autism, mainly because they tend to have smaller stems and better social skills. A lot of that is due to masking. So characteristics in girls, you'll see there is some overlap with boys, but there's a lot more, I would say, characteristics in girls. I've highlighted the ones that really spoke to my experience. So girls will have a stronger drive to be social than boys will. Autistic boys in general are happy being solitary and doing their own thing. They don't feel a big need to be social. Girls will feel a bigger need to be social, but they don't know how. They're weird. People know they're weird, and it's hard to fit in. Girls will mask early. I definitely started masking by the age of 6. By the age of 8, I would say I was fully masked. Yeah, I didn't get diagnosed. You came in late, but I didn't get diagnosed till I was 52. So very late diagnosis. Yeah. Girls will tend to have one best friend, and they'll be very possessive of that friend. That was certainly true for me. I did not want my one friend to have any other friends. Voracious reader and reads above grade level. I started reading early and read all the time. I used to get in trouble for reading at the dinner table. And I was supposed to be social at dinner and not read at dinner. Um, that's a good question, Jennifer. I haven't been involved in diagnosing children, but thank you, Barbara. I was going to say Barbara and Sarah do have experience with that and can let you know. The pediatrician might say there's some signs you might want to, see a psychologist, or you may notice signs. Girls oftentimes are in the gifted program, oftentimes because they're eager to please. And so they're going to excel at their schoolwork because they're eager to please their teachers. And overreaction to criticism. And I'm going to talk about rejection sensitivity in a little bit. As I said, girls tend to have smaller stems and are good at being invisible. I was a champ at being invisible. I could go through a whole school day in high school and not talk to a single person because nobody talked to me. So yeah, I was very much invisible. And then may prefer to play with boys, very common for autistic girls. Um, Actually, and slow to mature socially and mentally when all the girls are getting interested in boys and clothes and things like that. Your autistic girl might still be playing with her stuffed animals and, you know, wanting to still be childish because they're slower to mature. So it can be both, Vanessa. Um, That's a good question, Bob. I actually don't know. In general, I think that autistic boys tend to be more um, solitary. But I could certainly see that autistic boys might prefer to play with girls just because boys maybe can be more rough and tumble, and maybe an autistic boy doesn't want to be so physical. But back to Vanessa's question. So it could mean you have less of the characteristics are in lower degrees. Generally, the spectrum of diagnosis is based on how much it interferes with your daily life, if that makes sense. Right, and back to everyone's an individual. So yeah, it really comes down to how much does it interfere with your life on where you are on the spectrum. All right, so I mentioned masking. Masking is a big deal. Okay, I was reading comments, sorry. Okay. Yes, and unfortunately, that is common. I had many best friends pull back because I was too possessive. Yeah. And jealousy or possessiveness can come out poorly as as aggression or anger, yeah, hard to communicate what's going on. Okay, so masking. Masking is a huge big deal. Like I said, particularly for girls. And it is hiding your autistic characteristics to fit in. And it can start very early. Like I said, for me, it started probably around the age of 6 when I started school. The only way to possibly fit in was to hide all these characteristics that made me weird. And masking can be a thing you don't realize you're doing. It wasn't until probably when I was about 50, 51 that I realized I'd spent most of my life masking. I had masked so successfully, I'd masked from myself. And I was looking back on the first 6 years of my life that I realized, wow, I was masking. So masking can cause exhaustion. It takes a lot of energy to hide yourself all the time. So exhaustion is very common. Headaches. I still suffer from headaches multiple times a week. Anxiety and depression, both of which I also struggle with. So, if you find yourself really struggling with these things, you may be masking and not realizing it. Because, like I said, it takes a lot of energy to mask. Now, give me a second to grab these links and put them in the chat. These are 2 web pages I found very helpful. Basically, as a measure of how much you may be masking and if you might be on the spectrum, if some of this is sounding familiar, but you haven't been diagnosed. So let me give you those 2 links. All right, and then autism oftentimes does not present alone. There are a lot of comorbidities. About a quarter of autistic people also have ADHD. There can be a lot of overlap in some of the characteristics of ADHD and autism. Sleep issues are very common. We'll talk more about transitions in a little bit, but sleep involves transitions, and transitions are extremely hard. Gastrointestinal problems. 90% of autistic people have gastrointestinal problems. This is actually what first led me to look into a diagnosis, is when I found this out. I've had GI problems since I was extremely young. And that got me thinking that, maybe I have autistic characteristics. And then it turns out I actually really have autistic characteristics. Depression and anxiety, very common, and OCD is very common with autistic people. And a lot of times someone may be diagnosed with, say, OCD, but not autism, but they may be also autistic. So if you have an ADHD or an OCD diagnosis, an anxiety diagnosis, it might be worth looking into autism as well, because they may have missed that diagnosis while focusing on the other one. Okay, so let's talk about the challenges of being autistic. And this is where the hopefully understanding will come in for those of you who are not autistic, but maybe have autistic people in your life, to give you a better idea of what we're going through. A big challenge is autistic inertia. It's getting stuck. So I talked about getting stuck. Um, Not really, Jennifer, but mostly because I never went for a diagnosis of anything. I've been on an antidepressant and anti-anxiety medicine for many, many years, 10 years. So I guess maybe that could be a misdiagnosis. But yeah, I never went in for any other diagnosis. Yeah, so autistic inertia is a big deal. You just get stuck and you can't get unstuck. And you might be stuck on your phone, scrolling apps. You might be stuck watching TV. You might be stuck, doing an activity. Maybe you're stuck doing a craft or doing a hobby. So it's not just sitting that you're stuck, but you get stuck and you can't unstick. And it's very difficult. Like I can be sitting there screaming at myself in my brain, just get up, just do this, do it, do it, do it. And I can't. I cannot make my body get up. So if you have, a child that you cannot get them to do whatever it is you want them to do, they might be stuck. And I'll talk about ways to get unstuck in a little bit. Inconsistent productivity, hyper productivity followed by burnout, basically. So I will go through periods of time where I get tons and tons done. And then I might have a week where I can't do anything because I'm so burned out. And this is difficult in today's society. Right, exactly, Adam. It's difficult in today's society to be inconsistently productive. Oh, I could get a month's worth of work done in a week, but then maybe I don't do any work for a week. A lot of jobs aren't going to tolerate that. School isn't going to tolerate that. Exactly. So it's difficult. I mean, that's a real struggle that, an autistic person can get their work done. They can be a very productive worker, but it's going to be inconsistent. You have to measure it over, say, a month instead of over a week. Trouble with organization, boy, I'm not going to let you see my house. We'll leave it at that. Delayed processing. This is a big one. You will tell an autistic person something or ask them a question, and they may need 5 minutes to think about what you said before they can respond. And I've gotten much better at saying I need a few minutes so people don't get angry. But I went through a lot of my life with people getting angry at me that I couldn't respond right away to what they were saying. Just not being able to organize, just, getting overwhelmed, I would say. It's, overwhelm is a big thing. So it's easy to get overwhelmed with organization. If everything doesn't have a place, like finding a place for it is difficult. Figuring out how to organize something is difficult. Things just end up in piles. So, piles are very common for autistic people. And they know what's in their piles. Like I know what's in every one of my piles, but I probably have 100 piles around the house, which drives my husband insane. Right. Leave my chaos alone. That can happen too, Bob. Definitely getting stuck. It's that autistic inertia. Yeah. I like that, Bob. That is, yes. Yeah. Very much identify with that. And the info dumping I mentioned definitely can be a challenge because most people do not want to hear the minutia, sorry, the minutia of your special interest. They don't want to know every detail of your special interest. And so you find yourself maybe not talking at all because if you start talking about this topic, you're not going to stop. So it's, I don't like when people bring up my special interest because I know that if I start, I won't stop. And it's like I'm vibrating out of my skin to talk about it, but keeping myself from talking about it because they don't want to hear it in the amount I want to talk about it. And that's where it really helps to find other people with that same special interest. So I'm going to a convention when I am done with this meeting for the weekend of people with the same special interest as me so that we can all info dump on this special interest all weekend, and it will be wonderful. Okay, great question, Jennifer. For girls and women, oftentimes it will be media of some sort. So the first special interest I really remember having was the TV show MASH that started when I was 9 years old. So a weird special interest for a 9-year-old, maybe, but I was obsessed with the TV show MASH. Like I could tell you everything about that show, every character, every episode, like obsessed with MASH. Um, right now, my obsession is a Chinese drama called The Untamed. I've been obsessed with it for about 4 years. Um, a lot of times crafts can be a special interest, definitely. Um, I tend to always have some craft that is a special interest. Right now, it's something called diamond painting, and I spend, multiple hours a day diamond painting. So yeah, crafts certainly can be a special interest. Said it could be trains for some boys. It's trains. Another one for me as a child was gnomes. I was obsessed with gnomes. I owned lots of books on gnomes, knew a ton of things about gnomes, and Greek mythology. Huge special interest when I was a child. So lots of, they can change throughout your life, but it's something that, yeah, like everything about it. And you could talk about it for hours and hours. And it, takes up a lot of your brain space. That's pretty cool. Star Trek ships. I think that's pretty cool to be obsessed with. All right, some more challenges. Rejection sensitivity. Okay, nobody likes rejection, but autistic people are hyper sensitive to rejection. They can see rejection anywhere where there is no rejection. And that rejection will sit and eat away at them for weeks sometimes. And so autistic people will avoid putting themselves in any situation that might involve rejection. So it's just a hyper sensitivity to rejection. Yeah, it's tough. Like, and people will tell you all the time you're overreacting or they didn't mean it that way. because you read everything as a rejection. So a minor thing, you're having a conversation and, they get up to get a drink. You might see that as a rejection. They're not interested in my conversation. They're not interested in me, and you shut down when it wasn't a rejection at all. So big challenge. And it's a big challenge also because you don't put yourself into situations where there might be rejection, which means you miss out on a lot of opportunities in life. Yeah, like dating, like jobs, potentially, hobbies, support, not going to a group around your special interests, let's say, because you're worried or you think or nobody's going to like me there. So why bother? So you can miss out on a lot of opportunities. Decision fatigue. This is a huge one for me. You just get tired of making decisions. You can't do it anymore. And I definitely hit points where I'm like, I can't make decisions. Just decide. I don't care. Whatever. Just don't make me make a decision. It's exhausting. Demand avoidance. This is another one that can be really a big challenge in life. For some reason, a lot of autistic people don't like being told what to do. Even if it was something they were going to do anyways, once they're told to do it, they don't want to do it. And we're not trying to be difficult. It's just something, I don't know, in the brain that when someone tells us to do something, our instant reaction is no. And so this can be difficult. Right, exactly. I can be getting up to do the dishes, but if my husband says these dishes need to be done, I don't want to do dishes anymore. Don't tell me what to do. And it's not even trying to be difficult. You know what I mean? Like you're not trying to be oppositional. It's just being told to do it shuts you down for whatever reason. Yeah. Exhaustion. That's that hyperactive immune or nervous system, just leads to constant exhaustion. And then executive dysfunction. And so let's talk about what that is. So executive function is basically the ability to plan out an activity and work towards a goal. So it takes planning, organization, attention, self-control, time management, perseverance. It's a whole lot of things that go together to make it so that you can achieve a goal. People with autism very much struggle with executive function and being able to do all the things needed to reach a goal. All right, and then probably the biggest challenge I have found is autistic people have a high need for rest. That hyperactive nervous system makes us extremely tired a lot of the time. We have a very high need for rest. Like I personally need at least 9 hours of sleep a night to be able to function. If I don't get enough sleep, I have a headache all day. I just basically can't function. I need a lot of sleep and I need a lot of rest during the day. So if I do one activity, let's say the dishes, because we talked about dishes. If I do the dishes, I then need to rest for 15 or 20 minutes after doing the dishes. Most people don't need to rest after doing dishes. It's not a high energy thing, but for autistic people, it is. The smallest thing can be a big deal. Taking a shower can be a big deal. There's a lot of steps to taking a shower. You got to organize a lot in your head to do it. So you may need a rest after taking a shower. You may need, a rest after doing dishes. And I read a thing that said for autistic people, there is no work-life balance because life is work. Everything in life is work for an autistic person. And I definitely relate it to that, yeah, just deciding what to eat for lunch and making it is work. And I need a rest after it. And this has been a big one for me, to stop beating myself up over this. Why am I so lazy? Why can't I do what other people do? Why do I need a rest after I eat lunch? That's ridiculous. It took a long time for me to give myself permission to stop beating myself up for needing to rest. And your kids, if you have autistic kids, they may need a rest. Even if it's something you think is little, why do they need to rest after taking a shower? Because they do, you know? It's our nervous systems are so hyperactive. It's okay. Take the rest that you need. Yes, this was the biggest one for me. Just so much of my life just feeling useless because I had such a high need for rest. There aren't treatments for inertia, but I will talk about some tricks that work for me for inertia. All right, sorry, I was just checking my time. All right, so a great example. You have a kid that's autistic. You want them to clean your room, or you're autistic and you want to clean your room. This can be a major undertaking for a number of reasons. Some challenges with cleaning a room: autistic inertia, getting started, so difficult. Stopping what you're doing to go clean the room. Inconsistent productivity. You might clean that room like crazy for 15 minutes and then you burn out and the room's a third clean. Trouble with organization. I don't even know where all this stuff goes. How am I going to clean this room? Demand avoidance. If you tell your kid, go clean your room, and they're autistic, nope, they are going to shut down and not want to do it. Exhaustion. Maybe they clean for 10 minutes, but now they're exhausted and they need a rest. And then the executive dysfunction, putting all those steps together of cleaning a room. So cleaning a room can be a major challenge. So things that can help your kid clean their room, or you clean your room. First of all, prepare them that this is going to happen. Maybe on Wednesday, say, hey, how about this weekend we try to clean your room? It's not a demand. You're giving them lots of notice. They have time to think about it, come to terms with this is going to happen. And maybe each day, like, okay, Saturday afternoon, is that a good time for you that we can clean your room? So that you keep reminding them this is going to happen. And then they may not know what cleaning a room means. So you might have to make a list for them. So I have a list here. This is what it means to clean your room. These are the steps. Yep, exactly, Bob. You need that time. And I was talking about, that time to process, delayed processing. And for me, it's helpful to make a list. I make a list for myself like this. This is what it means to clean a room. And I can check things off the list. Because if you just tell me clean that room and I look at the room and I go, my goodness, that's overwhelming. I can't do that. I don't even know where to start to do that. Yeah, exactly, Adam. So here's the list for your kid. This is what it means to clean a room. Give them the list and help them. It's so overwhelming. Help them do it. Don't just say, go clean your room. Or it might be helpful to have a weekly schedule. This works well for me. So it means it takes a week to clean the room. But by the end of the week, the room is clean, and then you start over again on Monday. So every Monday, I put all the dishes in the sink. That's easy. I can do that. Every Tuesday, I put the trash in the trash can. Again, that's easy. I can do that. So it might be, you might need to break it up into each day they do one activity of the big activity. And then you'll see we need to have a trash can, we need to have a hamper, we need to have a bookshelf, we need to have a toy box, we need places for our things to go. I can't put them away if they don't have a place to go. And because I have trouble with organization, somebody needs to help me set up that place for them to go. So, as a parent of an autistic child, this is your job. Your job is to make sure they have places for their things to go. I can now, Vanessa, because I know that demand avoidance is part of autism. Until I learned that, no, I didn't realize at the moment I only wanted to say no because he asked me. I just knew I got really irritated and lost all motivation to do anything. So your kid might be on their way to clean their room, but if you say, "Oh, you need to clean your room," that could totally shut them down. And they may not realize that that is due to demand avoidance. Yeah, definitely, Vanessa. I think that all of this should be explained to a child if they are at a point to understand it. The more you know about how you work, the more you can work around it or find solutions that work for you. And so, with my son, he's ADHD, a little bit on the spectrum. And I definitely, as soon as he was old enough, explained some of these things to him that, you want to say no because someone asked you to do it. That's part of autism, things like that. Be your child's partner in helping them learn. I don't want to say to function or, helping them learn to help themselves, I guess maybe is a good way to put it. So as a parent, you can do a lot to be their partner and help them. And as an adult, you might have to be your own partner, your own parent through this to help yourself figure it out. All right, so for autistic inertia, what I've found works best for me for autistic inertia is setting a timer. So I need to get up and make dinner, let's say. I'm stuck. I can't get up. It's getting later and later. I need to make dinner. I'm stuck. I will set a timer for 5 minutes from now. And I will tell myself when that timer goes off, I'm going to stand up. And it works really well for me. The timer goes off, I stand up. Oftentimes, standing up's the hardest part. Once you're up, you can now go do things. It sounds ridiculous. I have to set an alarm to go to bed because I can autistic inertia myself into 4 a.m. very easily. So yeah, I have to set a timer to get up and go to bed. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And so if you need to do that, then do that. It's fine. Do what you need to do to make it work for you. That's been my biggest thing for getting over autistic inertia is setting a timer. Find what works for you. Maybe promise yourself a treat. If I get up, I can go get, a small piece of chocolate. I don't know, whatever works for you. You might have to bribe yourself to get around your inertia. You just have to find tricks. Think of yourself as an autistic child and you're trying to find the tricks that work for you. And then ways we can support autistic students. Provide notes. It can be really hard for an autistic person to listen and write at the same time. to figure out what's important and what isn't important, that delayed processing. By the time they've figured out what's important and what you've said, you've moved way on. So providing the notes can be very helpful. Having a consistent class structure. Autistic people tend to like routine. They know what to expect. Explain assignments. It can be hard to read and understand what someone's looking for. Use less text. If I see a wall of text, my brain shuts down. I can't do it. Use more visuals. Provide examples. You know, if you have a way you want something done, give an example. If I see an example, I will do it exactly the way you want it. Don't require students to have their camera or microphone on. This last almost hour has been really tough for me with the camera on the whole time. I want to stem. A lot of my stems involve my face, and that's distracting for other people to watch. So, you know, I don't like to be on camera. Be flexible with deadlines. We have inconsistent productivity. Maybe we did a great job on the Unit 4 assignment, but now we're burned out and can't even think about doing the Unit 5 assignment yet. So, you know, if you can give us a little more time, that could be great. Give us reminders that things are coming up. This kind of goes along with providing examples. Provide a checklist of what you're looking for in the assignment. Provide a template. Autistic people can be very good at, you know, fulfilling requirements or expectations if we know what they are. And provide specific directions. You know, provide 3 examples versus provide examples. What do you mean by provide examples? How many examples? Vagueness, very difficult for autistic people. We don't like vagueness. Be specific. Good question, Bob. I find it easier to be remote personally. I won't speak for all autistic people, but I have done a degree remote. It works better for inconsistent productivity. It works better for I'm exhausted today, you know, getting yourself up out of the house to a classroom, sitting in the classroom, dealing with all the sensory input of a classroom. It can be very overwhelming. So for me, remote is a lot easier. But I don't know that that would be true for all autistic people. But yeah, there's a lot of advantages to remote. You can be in your own comfortable environment where you feel safe and secure. And that's important for autistic people too, is to have that place there safe and secure. Right, and you don't have to get off the couch. It's easy to turn on the computer. Much harder to get off the couch, get dressed, and get out the door. Yeah. All right, so hold on. Let me just throw this back up 1 second. And this is an example of using less text. Sorry. These are my unit announcements. No visuals, very little text. And then references. So that is the end of what I had to talk about tonight or today. That is a good question. Melissa, do you have a link to the recording or will it be sent out? Thank you, Dora. I'm glad that you found it informative and I will have fun this weekend. And I'm giving myself permission to go hide in my room when I need to and not feel guilty about it, which is hard for me. I feel like if I'm at something like this, I have to be social. Wow, Barbara, in so many ways. Mostly just being gentle with myself more than anything. Not beating myself up over things I can't control because they're part of me. Not feeling like I'm lazy or incompetent or whatever we tell ourselves, knowing there's a reason for this and this is how I am. It's just, I'm so much gentler with myself, and that has made a huge difference. Yes, Bob, 1 second, sorry. So I actually have 2 pages of references. So here's page 1 of references. Definitely,
And
Barbara.
Christine,
Yes.
this will be on the autism website.
Okay,
There will be a link in the school's calendar that they have for students, but it will also be up on our YouTube channel, Ask ASC.
great. Okay. So yeah, it will be available. Here's page 2 of the references. You're welcome. Yeah, so if anyone wants to chat at any point, definitely email me. Let me put my email in the chat. I'm always eager to talk about autism and being an autistic adult, and particularly an autistic woman, but any adult. Or if you want, an autistic perspective to help with something, a challenge with your child, uh, definitely send an email. I'm always available. So yeah, thank you for coming. Great questions, great comments. Yeah, Kimberly, I don't know where the autism website is. Thank you, Melissa. Melissa just posted it. Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Christine.
Yep. All right. If there aren't any more, I'm glad that it helped. It's hard to be an autistic adult and not know. Right. If there aren't any more questions or comments, then thank you so much for coming, and please reach out if you need anything. Goodbye. Thank you, Melissa.